Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I will recap the movie titled Vengeance. A woman named Irene Costello is preparing lunch at her home in Macau while her husband and children return from being out in the rain. As she tends to her children, the doorbell rings. Her husband checks the peephole, but before he can react, he is violently gunned down and shot twice through the door. Terrified, Irene hides her children in a closet to protect them from the unknown attackers and uses her own pistol to shoot at them through the door of her room. She manages to hit one's ear, but that is all she's able to do before getting shot multiple times in the chest. The kids would have been left unscathed if they hadn't seen anyone's face, but the killers murder them too, firing through the door. Miraculously, Irene survives the brutal attack and is taken to the hospital. There she is gravely injured, unable to move or speak. Her father, Francis Costello, a former hitman turned chef, travels to Macau to visit her. Seeing his daughter in such a state, he is devastated and demands to know who is responsible for the attack. Unable to speak, Irene points to words on a newspaper, indicating that there were 3 men involved. She also reveals that she managed to shoot one of the attackers, causing him to lose his left ear. Although severely injured, she implores her father to avenge the deaths of her husband and children. Filled with sorrow and rage, Francis promises her that he will not rest until he has avenged their deaths. On his way back, the lead investigator on the case, Inspector Wong, questions Francis, trying to get basic information from him. He tells her that he runs a cafe in Paris and inquires how long it might take to solve the case. She reassures him that they are trying their best, but as he leaves, Francis discreetly steals several pieces of evidence from the investigation table, determined to handle it himself. Consumed by his grief and anger, he writes the word vengeance on all of the photographs of the crime scene, symbolizing his resolve to hunt down the killers and also to help him remember. Meanwhile, in another part of Macau, a hitman named Kwai meets with George Feng for a business deal. Feng suspects his girlfriend is cheating on him with his bodyguard and orders Kwai and his partners, Chu and Fat Luck, to kill the bodyguard. The trio of hitmen arrives at the hotel where the couple is staying, which is coincidentally the same hotel where Francis is staying. They sneak into the room where the couple is engaged in an intimate moment and carry out the hit with his silenced gun. Francis happens to walk past the room right at that moment and stops in his tracks at the sound. Just then, the trio stumbles upon him as they exit the room, leading to an awkward silence. Despite the strange encounter, Francis simply turns and walks away, leaving the hitman confused. Later, he is called in to identify the suspects of the recent killing, but he denies recognizing any of them, even though he had seen the trio earlier. However, determined to find those responsible for his family's murder, he decides to follow the trio of hitmen. He tracks them through the streets and down into the subway, where they finally confront each other. Francis offers them a job to help him find and kill the men who murdered his daughter's family. He offers a substantial sum of money, along with his watch, restaurant, and house in Paris as payment. Intrigued by the offer and sensing Francis' desperation, the trio agrees to take the job. Francis begins taking Polaroid photos of the trio to aid his fading memory, explaining that he needs to remember them as his condition deteriorates. Meanwhile, Irene is sent back to Paris to recover, while Francis and the trio visit the house where the massacre took place. As they step inside, the memories of that fateful day flood back and they begin to study the clues left behind. Francis gazes around the kitchen, discarding the rotting food from the fateful day, and in a moment of normalcy amidst the chaos, prepares lunch for them. As they eat, they discuss the details of the killers and the weapons they used, including a Mad Max, a Magnum, and a shotgun. They analyze the evidence, concluding that one of the killers favored his left foot, another was left-handed, and Francis adds that one of them lost his left ear when Irene shot him, narrowing down their options further. Then, to the trio's surprise, Francis asks for a gun of his own. Skeptical of his abilities, Chu challenges him to disassemble and reassemble a gun. Francis agrees to do it blindfolded and performs the task flawlessly, impressing the others and casting doubt on his claim of being just a chef. Afterward, the group then visits Tony, a cousin of Kwai who owns a junkyard and sells guns to hitmen in private. Tony lends Francis a gun and after some questioning reveals that he recently sold a Mad Max to some men who operate seafood markets in Hong Kong. With this new piece of information, the group travels to Hong Kong, where Francis spends the journey studying the Polaroid photos he took of the trio, trying to solidify their images in his mind. Once in Hong Kong, they arrive at the seafood market, Kwai and Chu going ahead to scout while Luck and Francis wait in the van. The two spot a man on a boat with a bandage over his left ear, seemingly talking to another man who is left-handed. Back in the van, the group discusses the possibility that these men are the killers they are looking for. As they wait for the men to leave so they can follow, Francis talks about his restaurant and its name, reminding the trio that it now belongs to them, having led him to his daughter's assailants. Eventually, the two suspects leave and the group follows them in their van as night falls, hoping that they will lead them to the third suspect as well. They stop near a wooded area, where the suspects appear to be having dinner. As Francis and the trio approach, ready for a confrontation, they are surprised and stop short when the killer's family suddenly arrive, wives and children calling out to their fathers. The group decides to hold back and watch from a distance. When the killers finally come over to talk, they admit that they were hired by someone to do the job. Francis demands to know why they killed the children since there was no apparent need to which one of them admits that it was a mistake and that he panicked because the children saw their faces. When asked who ordered the hit, they remain silent, imploring instead for a showdown. Kwai, however, refuses to initiate a fight in front of the families, and as a gesture of goodwill, the killers offer the group some food, which Francis refuses, the others following his lead. Once the families leave, the tension builds again and a deadly shootout ensues. However, during the confrontation, Francis becomes disoriented, his memory and focus failing him at a critical moment. As a result of his confusion and the growing darkness of the night, he ends up getting shot in the chest, and the hitman managed to escape with minor injuries. The trio takes Francis to a workshop where they attempt to remove the bullet from his chest using makeshift tools. During this time, Francis confesses that he used to be in the same line of work as them, and that he still has a bullet lodged in his brain from a previous job. The doctors had warned him that his memory would gradually fade, but he is determined to seek revenge before his mind completely deteriorates. While they are tending to Francis' wounds, Feng calls Kwai, asking for help. He informs them that his men were attacked by a group that included 3 Chinese men and a white guy, making the trio realize that Feng is the one who ordered the hit on Francis' family, and thus they decide to take action. They track down the location where Feng's hitmen are being treated and ambush them, killing all 3. Chu takes pictures of the dead men for Francis to remember. Feng, desperate to save himself, calls Kwai again, trying to negotiate. He explains that Irene's husband was trying to have him imprisoned, and that he only intended for Irene and her husband to be killed. The children were just collateral damage. Kwai, however, tells Feng that Francis has paid them too much to consider any kind of deal. Later, the trio informs Francis that their boss, George Feng, was behind the attack on his family, but reassures him that they are now on his side. Later that night, as heavy rain falls, they are ambushed by more of Feng's men. However, the barking of nearby dogs gives away the attacker's position. Francis and the hitmen make a run for it, fighting off their pursuers as they escape through the narrow stairways and streets. However, Francis' condition worsens and he struggles to keep up with the others. He loses sight of them in the crowd, disoriented by the sea of identical umbrellas. Desperate to find his allies, he takes out his Polaroids, trying to match the faces of the trio with the people around him. Fortunately, the trio manages to spot him and reunite with him before any further harm comes to him. The next day, Kwai tries to call his cousin Tony but gets no response. Unbeknownst to him, Tony and his wife have been brutally attacked by Feng, with the wife killed and Tony hung by a rope around his hands, barely conscious. Kwai and the others are seated in a rundown cafe where the television broadcasts news of the murder of the hitman on the previous day. Still struggling with his failing memory, Francis asks if they know the men in the news. Chu shows him photographs of their enemies, but he cannot remember why he holds a grudge against them. Frustrated, Chu moves away while Luck shows Francis more Polaroid photos of his daughter and her slain family, trying to jog his memory. But Francis' confusion deepens as he fails to remember even the reason why he sought revenge in the first place. Disheartened, the group later reaches a beachside location by boat where the families of the trio reside. Kwai's wife is wary of Francis, but he asks her to take care of him for a few days while they handle other matters in Macau. As they watch Francis interact with the children, they discuss the point of seeking revenge even as one's memory fades. Chu insists that Francis did not choose to forget, and even so, they are his friends now and determined to carry out the task themselves. They reach Macau and dock at Tony's junkyard, finding him barely alive. However, before he dies, he informs them about the various guns he has hidden, sufficient for a full-scale battle. As the trio prepares the weapons and ammunition, they notice Feng's men sneaking around the junkyard, hiding behind piles of scrap. A confrontation ensues, with Feng observing from a distance, seemingly amused by the unfolding chaos. Despite their best efforts, the trio is outnumbered but remains resolute. They light cigarettes, preparing for a final stand, ready to sacrifice themselves for their cause. A week later, the news of their deaths is broadcast on television. Francis, now dining with Kwai's family, is struck by the report. He feels a vague sense of familiarity but cannot fully grasp the connection. Kwai's young daughter confirms that the deceased were once his closest friends. Overwhelmed by grief, Kwai's wife sobs uncontrollably, while Francis, looking deeply troubled, goes to the beachside, kneels, and prays for safety. He remains there, praying through the day and night, until he has a vision of the ones he lost dear to him, including his daughter. This fills him with a forgotten need for revenge, and returning to the room, he gazes at the gun Kwai had given him, inscribed with George Feng's name. Determined to kill Feng by himself, he steels himself for the final act of vengeance. The next morning, Feng is at a street-side restaurant, flirting with a woman in a red dress who sits at a nearby table. Suddenly, a group of children rushes over to him, selling flags and sticking them onto him. Distracted by the woman, he lets them put the stickers on until she stands and walks away, heading to her van where Francis awaits. The woman is revealed to be Kwai's wife, and the plan is to make Feng stand out publicly with numerous flags so that Francis can identify him easily. He thanks her with a kiss on her cheek, watching as she drives off, and then approaches the restaurant, spotting Feng. With a sense of purpose, Francis opens fire, but Feng's bodyguards quickly intervene, helping him escape. Francis manages a few hits, but Feng appears to be wearing a bulletproof vest, seemingly unharmed. During the ensuing chase, Francis is struck by traffic and his confusion grows, making it difficult for him to keep track of Feng. Feng uses the distraction to his advantage, shooting Francis in the leg and removing the flag-covered jacket, which makes it impossible for Francis to recognize him. Now grasping at straws, Francis starts yelling Feng's name, but he and his men are hidden, waiting to ambush him. Using his remaining strength and skill, Francis manages to spot one of Feng's men in a car mirror and shoots them one by one. Feng, adapting a strategy, hides his gun and removes any stickers in order to pass unnoticed. However, the wind blows his tie and reveals a hidden sticker, alerting Francis to his identity. He takes advantage of this slip-up, firing at Feng's neck before Feng can shoot him, and orders him to put on the jacket covered in stickers to confirm his identity. He carefully matches the bullet holes in the jacket with those on Feng and realizes that he has indeed found his target. With a grim sense of satisfaction, he shoots Feng in the forehead, killing him instantly. Having finally avenged his daughter, Francis feels a profound sense of inner peace. As night falls, he walks away into the darkness, at last having completed his quest for revenge. In the final scene, Francis sits at a beachside table with Kuei's wife and her children. They share a meal, laughter filling the air. This moment of normalcy and joy is reminiscent of the time Francis once spent with his own daughter and grandchildren, suggesting a semblance of closure and peace after his long journey for vengeance. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this.